right, I'll call the meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Can I have a roll call when you're ready?
Mr. Ackerson,
Here.
Ms. Billman,
Here.
Mr. Fell,
Here.
Mr. Fitch,
Here.
Mr. Hopkins, Ms. Wadrago,
Here.
Mr. Trail, and Mr. Turner.
Here. We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? Approval of the minutes from the December 21st, 2017 regular Plan Commission meeting. Do we have any motions regarding the minutes? Moved by Mr. Fell. Second by Mr. Trail. Any changes to the minutes or comments? We'll then vote on the minutes by voice. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Communications. We do have a communication tonight regarding the two Plan Commission cases. This is from a Mr. Dustin Tarter. It's been entered into the record. I will summarize this. Mr. Tarter is opposed to the specific rezoning of R4 for this property, but not to the necessarily to the zoning comprehensive plan amendment to residential, and express some sympathy for rezoning to an R2 or one or two family structures would be the best use of the property. So that's our communication. We don't have any continued public hearings or old business. New public hearings. We have had a plan case 2324 SU17 that was withdrawn and apparently will tentatively be heard at the February 8th, 2018 regular Plan Commission meeting. We have two cases, therefore, tonight that we will open. We have Plan Case 2326 CP17, request by the Urbana School District to amend the 2005 Comprehensive Plan future land use designation for 1102 North Broadway Avenue from institutional to mixed residential. Companion case of 2325 M17, request by the school district to rezone 5 parcels totaling 3.5 acres from CRE to R4 medium density. This is located at 1102 North Broadway Avenue. So, Mr. Garcia, if you would, please.
Yes, good evening. Okay, so as was just mentioned, these are two requests from the Urbana School District for their property at 1102 North Broadway Avenue, and that's the site of the former Washington School. The first request is to change the future land use designation in the Urbana Comprehensive Plan from institutional to mixed residential, and the other request is to rezone the property from CRE, which is Conservation, Recreation, Education, to R4 medium density multiple family residential district. So for a little bit of background, the Washington School was built in 1925. It had 2 additions put on in the 1950s. But by 2013, the buildings were no longer useful as a school, so the school was closed. And it's been vacant since that time. Initially, the school district thought they might be able to reuse the buildings, but the cost to bring the buildings up to modern standards for schools and modern code requirements would be prohibitively expensive. So once they determined that they could no longer reuse the property, they've been seeking a buyer for the site. Last year there was one potential buyer, but that fell through. Given that the current zoning designation of CRE is pretty restrictive, the school district consulted with city staff on what their best options for rezoning would be, and the choice was made to pursue the R4 zoning as the best option. And really, if the idea is to reuse the 3.5 acre lot, R4 makes that much more possible than another zone. Let me pull up Exhibit A here. So there's the location of the site. It's on Broadway, across the street from Crystal Lake Park. It's surrounded mostly by single-family residential. And then zoning-wise, you see it's this green parcel in the middle. That's zone CRE. The surrounding zones are, the immediately surrounding zones are R3, which is single and two-family residential. And then across the street is another CRE zone. And then nearby, you have some multifamily residential zones further south on Broadway. As I mentioned, in terms of the zoning, the CRE zoning, it's called Conservation, Recreation, Education, and it's pretty appropriately named because that's about all that you can do with it. You can do conservation things, you can have parks and recreation, you can have schools, you can have government uses, and aside from that, there's not much that you can do with that zone. So the proposed zoning district is R4, which is medium density multiple family residential. And the purpose of that zone is to provide areas for multiple family dwellings at low and medium densities. R4 also allows low density single family and duplex uses. The 2005 comprehensive plan identifies the future land use as institutional. But as mentioned, the proposed change would change that to mixed residential, which, let's see, which contain a variety of residential land uses, including single-family residences, duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily development. We feel that this site would be well suited for low to medium density residential uses, given that it is surrounded by the park on the west and then the residential neighborhood on all three other sides. It's also well served by public transit, sidewalks, and designated bike routes, and it's pretty close to downtown and University Avenue and Cunningham Avenue commercial areas. So, to speak about the proposed comprehensive plan amendment, when the plan was adopted in 2005, the school was still going strong, and there were no plans at that time to redevelop the site. So the institutional designation really fit at that time with the comprehensive plan. But now that the school has been vacant for several years, and there are no plans to use the site for a school, a change to mixed residential is proposed. And again, given the site's context, this makes a lot of sense. The comprehensive plan also distinguishes between urban patterns and suburban patterns of mixed residential. And we feel that the urban pattern would be appropriate for this site. And just quoting from the comprehensive plan, the urban pattern are areas within existing neighborhoods that are considered appropriate for a mix of residential densities. New development should incorporate a design that respects the urban environment, including buildings that face the street and provide access from the rear where possible. The character and scale of new development shall consider the overall context of the neighborhood. Also, mixed residential would give a potential developer the flexibility to provide low or medium density residential uses or a combination of the two. In terms of the proposed rezoning, well, the future land use designation sort of it describes what the desired uses for a site would look like. It's really, as we know, the zoning that ultimately determines what gets to be built or what can be built. And in the R4 zoning district, it's really the best option to allow the site to be developed to match the intent of the mixed residential urban pattern future land use designation, because the R4 zone allows for a mix of low and medium density residential uses and for public and institutional uses if those are desired. Also, the R4 zone really gives the best option to reuse part or all of the existing buildings that are on the site, because it does allow for multiple family residential. Some of the lower zones like R2 and R3 would not allow for reuse of the buildings for residential uses, or really probably much else other than government uses. And as in all of our rezoning cases, we will look at the LaSalle criteria, so I'll run through those pretty quickly. You can follow along in your memo if you like. I'm on page 5 towards the bottom. So number 1 of the criteria talks about the existing land uses and zoning of the nearby properties. And this is the degree to which the existing and proposed zoning districts are compatible with existing land uses and land use regulations in the immediate area. The R4 district is compatible with the existing zoning and land uses of the surrounding area, since it allows low to medium density residential development, which would fit into the existing residential uses in the neighborhood. And also, the R4 district does limit the intensity of the type of multifamily residential that you can build. So it is pretty low intensity multifamily. You're not going to see really tall buildings or really dense developments in the R4 zone. Criteria number 2 is the extent to which property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. As I mentioned earlier, the CRE zone has pretty limited uses that it allows, which also limits its value and its potential to be reused. And the R4 zoning district would certainly increase the property's value by allowing for single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, and apartments on the site. It would also increase the likelihood, the R4 zoning would increase the likelihood that the site, which has been tax exempt for, well, maybe forever, would be developed and could generate some property tax revenues for the city. Criteria 3 and 4 deal with the health, safety, and morals and general welfare of the public, as well as the relative gain to the public of the proposed rezoning. We don't feel that the proposed zoning would harm the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public. And in addition, since the current zoning severely limits the redevelopment potential of the site, the rezoning would facilitate the sale and reuse of the property that would be beneficial to the public. Criteria 5 is the suitability of the property for the zoned purposes. This property would be is well suited for low to medium density residential uses, which would be provided by rezoning to R4. And given its surroundings, the best use for the site would be some sort of residential use. Again, it's well served by public transit, sidewalks, and bike routes. And given that another institutional use is unlikely, the R4 zoning makes sense for this property. Criteria number 6 is the length of time the property has been vacant as zoned. Again, it's been vacant since 2013, and it likely will remain vacant for the foreseeable future if it's not rezoned. That concludes my report. The options that the Plan Commission has in this case are to forward the case to the City Council with a recommendation to approve the 2 requests. The other option is to forward the cases to City Council with a recommendation to deny the requests. Staff would support a recommendation to approve the proposed rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment. I can take any questions at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Fell?
It appears from the map that this is it actually 5 parcels of land?
It is, yes.
The school district, if you know, they're not going to tear down the school, right? That's going to be up to the buyer?
As far as I know, yes. There is a representative from the school district here, Carol Baker, and she could probably answer questions about
Okay.
the school district's plans
So-
better than I.
Okay, if it's 5 parcels of land with one school on it, now we're essentially prohibiting the sale of one of these parcels individually. I mean, you buy the whole thing or you buy none of it. There's a school on it. I mean, unless the building's gone, you can't buy a piece of ground with a corner of a school on it. I'm just,
Well,
the gist of my question is this an all or nothing sale?
That really is not germane to the rezoning or the comprehensive plan amendment. Or if you could help me understand how that is pertinent.
Well,
To the
to me, it's
request.
pertinent because if this is sold as one parcel, you're not going to build single-family houses on it. You're buying one big chunk of land, and you do something different with one big chunk of land than you do with 5 smaller chunks of land. That's what I'm getting at.
Is there a question in there for staff? Or is this more of a discussion? Are you starting to go into more of the discussion?
Well, the question is, can somebody buy one of these 5 lots individually if this goes through?
Do we know if the building does cross each of the property lines? Or
I
might
think
there
it's
be a
only.
parcel?
I think it's only on. Well, let's see.
I think technically there might be 1 or 2 that are not.
Yeah, so the building is mostly on these 2 parcels here. I think there's a playground up here. This is sort of just open grass area, and then this is this is paved but otherwise open.
Mr. Fell?
I guess we'll save this for discussion.
Thank you. Further questions for Mr. Garcia? I had a question about some of the floor area ratio and such. So depending on how these parcels sell, leaving that aside, how big of an apartment building are we talking about? I guess it depends on the nature of the sale, but if you could give us some idea.
Yeah, so the floor area ratio here is 0.5. So, so if you wanted to build I don't think I don't think anybody would do this necessarily. If you just built a 1-story building, it could cover half the site. More likely would probably be a 2 or 3-story building, which if you did a 2-story building, it could cover a quarter of the site. 3-story building could cover what's 1/3 times 0.5? That's 17%. Yeah, 16.6
Okay.
repeating
The
percent.
higher they go, the less of the footprint they could have.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions? Ms. Billman?
Yeah, when were the other multifamily structures, properties built?
The ones nearby.
Yeah.
So the Crystal View townhomes are right down here. Actually, I could probably go to the zoning map to give you a better. Not sure when the ones here were built. These properties down here are the Crystal View townhomes. I think those were built maybe 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. Over here, right over here is Highland Green. That was just built this past year. Then I think these multifamily buildings have been there maybe for a couple decades.
So those were already part of the future land use plan?
Yes, let me pull
Or
that
were
up.
they,
So the future land use plan shows mixed residential for that whole sort of swath. That's a couple blocks south.
okay, I may have missed something, but how many stories can be in R4?
Well, the maximum height is 35 feet, so that's 3 stories, maybe 3.5 stories.
Is that it, Ms. Billman? Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Garcia? No further questions? Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you.
Let me remind the public and the petitioner of the rules for public hearing of the Urbana Plan Commission. The petitioner will be allowed to present their case to the commission. The commission may ask questions. Then, following that presentation, anybody in favor of the proposal will be allowed to address the commission. Again, we may ask questions. Following that, any opponents of the proposal will be allowed to address the commission with possible questions. And finally, the petitioner may address the commission one last time to address any concerns. So with that having said, if the school district would like to address the commission, we would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could just state your name for the record.
Good evening. I'm Carol Baker. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Urbana School District, and I'm here in support of the recommendation this evening. Our board did talk about the different options for this property. We've put this out to bid 2 different times, trying to redevelop the property, hoping somebody would take some interest in it. First time we had no bids, and the second time we had one bidder who ended up, after about 8 months, pulling out and deciding not to go forward with the project. So we've sat sat another year almost trying to decide what to do, and we've been working with the city. They've been very helpful to try to help us to get this redeveloped, because I think it's to all of our advantage to get this property used in some way. So we talked about the different options, and with the city's help, we decided on the R4 designation. We thought that provided the most flexibility as far as a developer, and we figured going through this process now and getting public input, it would probably be helpful for a developer to know that it's already been rezoned. They don't have to go through this, so we wanted to make sure we went through that process, hoping that that will help develop the property going forward. And we're good. Hopefully this is going to go through, and we'll see what interest we can get after this. But I'm happy to answer any questions, but obviously the school board did look at this and approved the recommendation, and as far as applying for the R4 designation.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Baker? Mr. Ackerson?
Yes, please, thank you. I'm asking you to be redundant, but could you articulate a little bit more? Why R4 and not R3?
We thought R4 provided the most flexibility for a developer, somebody to come in and actually reuse the property. The original bid that we got was for redevelopment of the property. They were going to use it and do possibly a senior living. So that would be great. It's a wonderful historical property, so if we could do that, we would appreciate doing that. But if not, if it's too expensive, it also offered the option to tear down and do something residential.
Mr. Ackerson?
Just to follow up then, since, to follow up another question came earlier, then so part of this has to do with our being able to sell this and being able to make good use of important piece of property we'd like to make use of. Has there been any discussion about whether this would be an all or none sale or breaking up into various parcels in terms of
Yeah, we've
how
never
you would use
discussed
it?
breaking it up. It's always been an all or none. I mean, we haven't talked about it, so I can't speak for the board to say whether they would be interested in breaking it up, but they've not talked about that to this point.
Any further questions? No? Thank you very much. Oh, Mr. Trail.
Just quickly, why does the school system think this property is no longer of any use for schools? Is it too small for?
It's too small. The building has asbestos in the walls, so we've tried to do.
Everything has asbestos
I mean, yeah,
these days.
but to be able to use it in any way for technology for us, it's just not feasible. Estimates we got were so expensive.
So the parcel's too small, even if the school system decided in the future
Yeah.
to just raise the building and build a school, it's too small.
And we've talked about using it for a central office. I mean, not just for school purposes, but, educational purposes, but for office building, and it wasn't going to be feasible,
I mean,
so.
it is hard to get hold of properties in, reasonable places to build schools, so.
Yeah. We're hoping somebody can reuse it, because to demolish it is pretty costly for us to do.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Hopkins?
There's something subtle going on here that maybe I'm missing, or maybe I'm just picking up. One option is reuse of the building. Am I correct?
Yeah, I suppose if somebody
Okay.
would be interested, I don't know that we think that's going to happen, but if somebody wants to, and has the money to do it, I suppose they would be able to do that.
And is a difference between R3 and R4 that reuse of the building
It's
is
my
more or
understanding.
less plausible between R3 and R4?
Well, if you wanted to reuse the building for, say, an apartment building, which a lot of old schools get redeveloped as apartments or condos, that would not be allowed in the R3 zone, since multifamily isn't allowed, so R4 would give that option.
Okay. And it also could be housing for the elderly. And
Yes.
easily in R4, not in R3. There are also special uses in R4 that make reuse of the building plausible. And now I'm getting to discussion.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that
You're
what I
clear.
was picking up on here wasn't me misunderstanding.
Okay, further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak in support of this proposal? Does anybody wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? Okay. If that's going to be it, then I'll give you some leniency on time. If it was going to be everybody, then we'd limit it, limit your time. But please step forward and, try to keep your remarks fairly succinct, but we'll give you the time you need to address the commission, please. And just state your name for the record. Yes, sir. State your name for the record if you could sign that sheet.
Yes, I signed the one over there.
Okay.
My name is Johnny Robinson.
Okay.
I'm a homeowner in the area. If you would have put Exhibit B up again and look at that map, you'll see that in the area there, the owner, the single-family homes or duplex family homes are very small, or probably half the size of this whole neighborhood. If you lived in one of those homes and you were looking at all of these apartments around you, you'd be pretty nervous because Cunningham Children's Home is in the green area. All the brown area on there is all apartments. And I am very concerned about this as a community. As a community, it's something that I want to own and I want to put my money and effort into and perhaps pass this on to my children. And that's a community. That's something where people live for a long time and put their own personal heart into. Apartments are transient. People come and go. And I'm afraid if you think about what's happened in this neighborhood in the last 10 years, it's all been apartments. We've been invaded by apartments everywhere. And I'm afraid that our neighborhood is being stigmatized as being in decline and it's a place to put things that nobody else wants. Now, I think that low-income housing is a great thing. I think people should have a place to live, but it's a mistake to put it all in the same place. Because when you do that, you create a slum. And Urbana doesn't need a slum, and we don't want to be a slum. I think that if you were to talk to everybody who owns a house in this neighborhood, they would all say, no more apartments. And that's my feeling, and I would like to see it zoned as R3.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Robinson? Mr. Ackerson?
You said if you talk to everyone in this neighborhood. Have you talked to any of your neighbors?
I have talked to many of them. Some of them are here now.
Okay.
I haven't
Some of
heard of
them are here
I
now.
haven't
I'm
heard of
just-
anyone who wasn't opposed to the idea of
Like
it being
3
an
or
apartment.
4, a dozen?
I would say about 10.
Okay.
Okay. The bad weather has been a real inhibition of us getting
Sure.
together.
Yeah, yeah. I do have one question. How do you feel about duplexes?
I don't have a problem with duplexes because it seems to work, I think.
Sure, two-family.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Next person, sir. If you could step to the table and state your name and sign the paper if you haven't already.
I signed back there, is that all right?
Sure.
Bob Leach, I live in the neighborhood. First of all, for the, I don't know, the city staff, when I first saw anything about this was a sign there by the school. And I thought, oh, what's this about, you know? Because, you know, I thought maybe I would get something. Well, it turns out that it's like the 250 feet.
If you, yeah, whatever the zoning ordinance requires. That's right, yeah.
That's, you know, for a project like this, does that seem right? You know, I mean, 250 feet, you know, that, it doesn't seem like you're really canvassing the neighborhood or letting the neighborhood know that something this big is being discussed. So that's one thing. That could maybe extend out a little bit, I hope. Now, the school board, if they talk about flexibility for the developer, and I didn't hear anything from the school board about talking about the neighbors, you know. So I think they have a responsibility for the neighborhood, not just for the school board. Another thing is, it seems to me that it sounds like they're worried that they've let it out to bid twice, didn't get any bites the first time, or at least nothing that was interesting to them. The second time, one bidder, and then it fell through. Well, that was all, what, 2 years ago? A year ago? You know, a whole lot of things have changed. A new administration in, the economy seems to be going crazy, if you listen to some people. And apparently, if you listen to some people, a lot of the new tax law is going to benefit business and real estate business. So why, it seems to me, maybe things have changed. Why not put it out for a bid again and see if there's any interest? To make these big changes now, there's no inducement for a developer to horse trade, it doesn't seem to me. I think you could do a little better if you held on to some of what you got, you know. And that, to me, would be to have either the zoning that's there now or a lower zoning. I mean, this could all be changed again later, you know. I know it's probably a pain for the city staff and the planning commission and the city council to revisit these things over and over again, but this is a big deal for the neighborhood, you know. I would like to see it zoned lower. Another thing, are those apartments, the Crystal Lake Village and the ones that are over the hill on Kerr that were just made, were those all zoned R4?
It looks to me like, maybe Mr. Gregory, you did your best tonight.
Sure, yeah, if you look, I think the exhibit is still up on the screen. So the Crystal View townhomes are zoned R5, and then the Highland Green over on Kerr Avenue is zoned R4.
Okay, well, I remember when the Crystal Lake thing, when that was first talked about, it's like, oh, you know, we can have a great mix of owner-occupied, single-family, you know, all these wonderful, you know, a mixed neighborhood that the city council has talked about, that's what they want the city to be, mixed neighborhoods, mixed income neighborhoods. But when push came to shove with that kind of zoning, what goes in? It's not single-family homes. And I think the same with the Kerr Avenue projects, that I don't, you know, if that was zoned R4, I don't know that there are any single-family. There are detached buildings there Maybe some of them are, I don't know. But I think I think you're giving away the store if you zone it too high. So that's it, what I got to say. Yep.
And I do need to sign in. My name is Janice Rutherford, and my property abuts right next to the school. I'm on the northeast corner of Broadway and Oakland, and the school's on the southeast corner of Broadway and Oakland. And it is a really big deal for our neighborhood. This is a really delightful neighborhood. It's already very mixed. There are some fairly large houses, nice houses. There's a lot of smaller houses. People have been there for a long time. There's a lot of characters in this neighborhood. On Division Street, there's a family that my kids used to trick-or-treat at who have enormous amounts of material in their front yard. But everybody coexists there really well, and it's a really delightful little neighborhood that butts against the park, and it's unique. In my understanding, that school is not going to be able to be rehabilitated. And which means that somebody coming in there is going to need to tear it down, and they're going to need to get their money back, which is meaning that they're going to have to put in fairly significant housing. The question I have, when we were talking about duplexes, are the buildings that face Kerr, which is Highland Glen, are those considered duplexes?
I don't know about the structures themselves. They may be, some may be duplexes, some may be bigger. But in any case, with the zoning, they can go big with R4.
Well, if we're talking about duplexes, then we're talking about complexes of duplexes, which is really going to significantly change the neighborhood. And so I would really like to see it be R3. The school's going to have to be torn down. That's most likely. I'd love to see it saved. I like historical buildings also, but from what I understand, one of the other reasons that the school district pulled out is because it was in bad shape. I mean, that's sort of the word on the street. This building is in bad shape. It would cost a lot to try to renovate it and bring it up to code. So there's going to be expense tearing it down. Somebody's going to need to get tax dollars back, some kind of subsidy back, in order to make their money in that property, and it's going to be densely built on. And we have Highland Glen right in that neighborhood. We have Crystal View in that neighborhood. If we put out something significant like that again in this area, it's gonna really change it. So are we going to have another question? Are we going to have another hearing when there is going to be another opportunity? Is this it? Is there another?
Well, it depends on how it goes tonight with us. There will certainly be a hearing with the city council.
Actually, this is the public hearing. City Council does hear the item, but the public hearing occurs at this meeting.
At this meeting? You would have a chance, I guess, to talk to the city council. If there may be another hearing, if we don't rezone it tonight and they sell the property as is, with the zoning that it has, there would probably be another one when the developer comes back with probably a similar kind of, I mean, that's just speculation on my part.
And so
But-
there would be an opportunity for the public to feed into what the developer was interested in developing?
To an extent, but if you're talking zoning, you're really talking the whole range of things that the developer could develop. There's other options that could be considered that where the city has a little more leverage over what to do. But it would, if it was a zoning hearing, it wouldn't be about the specifics of a proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Rutherford? Thank you. Anyone else? If you could state your name and sign the paper, that would be outstanding.
My name is Nancy Utman. I've lived in Urbana for 43 years, and I've watched developments, and I've watched apartments grow and buildings build, and I've also used Crystal Lake and Crystal Lake Park and the pool. And the last time I went to Crystal Lake Park to use the pool, I had to park in the hinterland. And this is already zoned as recreation park. Is the Park District interested in preserving this? If for nothing else, just open space in the city of Urbana? And what is the appraised value of this property per acre if the building is demolished? 2, what's the cost of demolishing this building, which sounds like it can't really be rehabilitated? But is not this could be an extension of Crystal Lake Park? That's one
Well,
thing.
theoretically, it could. I presume that if the Park District were interested in purchasing it, that they would have already been in contact with the school district. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody at the Park District.
Has anybody talked to the Park District?
Mr. Trail?
I have a feeling they're a lot more interested in the houses along Franklin.
I can't hear you.
They're a lot more interested in the houses along Franklin if they've got any money for land acquisition right now.
That's the neighborhood that butts into.
That butts into
Right,
Crystal
the
Lake
park.
Park.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Nobody's got a lot
I
of money
know
anymore.
they're interested in those properties from having
Yeah.
served on their advisory board. I haven't heard anything about it across the street.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's the appraised value of this property?
I do not know.
Does anybody know? What would it cost the Park District to buy it?
I know, we may be able to ask the school district about
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. And anyway, and isn't Urbana already overbuilt with apartments? How many vacancies do we have? I mean, do we need more apartment buildings at this point in time in this town when we have vacancies? And if you were to take a survey, has anyone taken a survey of the number of vacant apartments we have in this town?
I haven't seen one.
I think it would be well worth doing, because there are vacancies, and there are signs for rent all over. Even the subsidized apartments are not full. So do we need more apartment buildings in this town? Thank you for listening.
Okay, do you have any questions? Anybody? Well, I'll bring you back up.
I just have an answer
Okay, if you want to go ahead and answer that.
It's 450,000 is what it's appraised
For 2.4 acres?
for the entire site.
Yeah, I think it was 3.5 acres, but, yeah.
4.5?
3.5 acres. Yeah,
450,000.
correct. So over 100 grand an acre.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but it's if you think about the park, it's prime property, being so close to the park. And there's a shortage of parking at the park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else in the back? Yeah, sir?
I submitted written comments. I'm Dustin Carter. Can I speak at the meeting also?
Sure.
Okay.
Just don't read your letter again.
I won't do that. I promise. I
We've read
promise.
it.
So
You'd be
live-
surprised.
I live at 1205 North Berkeley Avenue, which is one lot removed from this parcel of land. I bought the house about 10 years ago, basically because I fell in love with the neighborhood, as these people have done a great example of showing that it is a great area to live. My biggest concern is that we're just creating an island of different zoning within what is a low-density neighborhood. It was built, was annexed by the city of Urbana. It lacks infrastructure. My street is tar chip. I don't have sidewalks. I don't have curbs. So when I heard that there was adequate pedestrian infrastructure, I was kind of confused by that, because the only sidewalk I know of exists along Broadway Avenue itself. No curbs, no gutters, low-rise streetlights, things like that, and we're talking about putting a big development in the middle of a small area. I respect that the school district is trying to get the best bid for the property, and I understand that. Personally, I would rather they land bank it, given what the Champaign School District has learned, but such is life. I would ask then that we not go for an R4 zoning, and we wait and see what kind of proposals can be created by potential developers, so that we can all work together to get something that works for the city's tax base, that works for the school district, and works for my neighborhood. I think if we go R4, we're going to get exactly what Janice said. Someone's going to come in, raise the building, incur the costs, and I'm going to end up with a giant 3-story vinyl-sided box facing my little single-family home. So that's really all I've got. Thank you for listening to me.
Any questions for Mr. Tarter? You're good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Mr. Trail? Hold on, Mr. Tarter.
I'm sorry.
The last minute.
So what would you like to see besides single-family homes?
I would accept a duplex style development. I think that if you actually look at a plat map of the area, the little 50-foot, actually they're 25, but they were sold as two 25-foot for 50-foot wide lots are already platted and exist in those larger parcels. There's still the right-of-way for Berkeley Avenue to reconnect it. Build me a nice little single-family neighborhood that young families, young professionals can buy single-family homes if they're attached. Zero lot line style. A duplex, standalone, 2 units. Sorry, trying to get that out in a way that makes
Not
sense.
sure the current, even R4 allows 0 lot line row
Yeah, I think-
house development.
It does.
Does it?
R4 does.
But within R3...
R3 does as well.
R3 does as well, and that would prohibit the gigantic vinyl-sided box that I would prefer not to look at. And I would prefer not to have it strain my neighborhood. And if I can get owner occupants in there, we're doing even better for the neighborhood. I mean, at the end of the day, this property is all north of University Avenue. This is part of the historic north end of Champaign-Urbana. I think we kind of owe it to the neighborhood and the community to give some owner-occupied options in that neighborhood and provide basically opportunities for young professionals to buy small single or small homes that can be owner-occupied.
Sure. Mr. Trail, anything further?
I think that's part of the gist of it. I think there's a big need for density. I mean, going forward, that's the way the world is going. That's how you get vibrant, walkable neighborhoods, whatever, is have greater density. But the owner-occupied thing, as soon as you start to say density, everyone thinks apartments, and now it's not owner-occupied. So I don't have an answer to this.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you again.
We're good, thank you. Okay, anybody else in opposition to the proposal? Ma'am? State your name and sign the paper, please.
Hi, I'm Janice Brownfield. I live exactly on the corner of Oakland and Berkeley, on the north side of the school. As the person before me said, that he moved into the neighborhood 10 years ago. I moved in the neighborhood 25 years ago because of the neighborhood. I'm from a small town of Muncie, which is in Vermilion County. It's a small town. I grew up there. I know the neighborhood. I know who people take care of me. I'm an older woman, and I'm a little bit anxious of having multi-duplexes, the duplexes I don't mind, is the buildings itself, because I don't want to be there at nighttime by myself when my husband's working. I feel the area now, I'm protected. If I have a problem, I got a neighbor I can go to. When those people come in or that it changes up over there, I'm going to be more afraid of going out and working in my area. It's a very unique area. It's very, we watch your back, you watch ours. When I go out of town, I know I can ask 3 people around my area, I'm going to be gone. They won't say anything to anybody else, but they know it's going to be watched over. I don't know when you're going to put in apartment houses if I won't feel so safe there. I love the area. I love the no sidewalks. There's no curbs. Neighbors are friendly with everybody. We understand each other. What happened off of Kerr Street, I'm going to see what's going to happen in 2 years, how the property looks. We'll see how it deteriorates if they keep up with it. I don't want my area to deteriorate. It's enough things going on there right now that it doesn't have high violence. You might hear every now and then somebody say there's a shot. Well, shot once every 15, 20 years is not bad in my neighborhood. It's a very secure area. I appreciate walking around the block and not worrying who's going to attack me around the corner, who's going to be watching me, because now they're going to be watching my routine. As you can see, I don't go in front of people very often. I'm just really a nervous person about this. I appreciate you thinking and listening to me, but we are a neighborhood, and it is just a fantastic place to raise your kids, to walk your dogs at nighttime without having to look over your shoulder. Why in our neighborhood do you want to keep doing this to us?
Any questions for Ms. Brownfield? No? We're good? Well, thank you very much. Anybody further? Who's opposed? No? Thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Baker, do you care to address us again, or? Any, I asked that before, there was none. No, you're good?
Unless you have any questions.
Any further questions? Mr. Hopkins?
I just want to make sure I got the number right. It was 450,000 is the appraised market value, not the tax one-third, yeah.
Can I ask
Okay.
a quick question? The appraisals with the current zoning or with?
Current zoning, with
Okay.
And with the building?
Okay. If you're going to ask your questions, I'm going to want her to come up. Thank you.
Yeah, that appraisal was done probably in 2013, let me see. But it was with, it was November of 13. So it was 450,000 with the building at that point in time. In the current zoning.
450?
450,000.
Correct. Mr. Fell?
Do you know how many square feet the lot is altogether? I'm going to drive at is what's our current FAR on that lot with the existing
Do
building
we
on
know
it?
that? I mean, I'm sure it's in the appraisal. This might take me a second to find it, but it is in here. I have it highlighted, 152,233 square feet.
Is it a lot?
Yes, that's the whole 3.5 acres is 152,233 square feet.
And do you know how many, does it say how many square feet the building is?
I think the building was like, it might take me a second to find that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look. Can I go back and look and then let you know? I mean, it might take me a few minutes to go through here.
That's fine if it's okay with the chairman.
Mr. Ackerson will let you stall because he has a question. So.
Okay.
My question has to do with your comment about there's asbestos in the building and one of the reasons that you guys weren't using it. Can you tell me if that had any impact on the folks who are thinking about developing it for senior housing is kind of part one, and part two is what limitation might that have on anybody else who wants to use that building for any kind of residential purposes?
I don't believe that had any impact on the first bidder for pulling out. Their reasoning to us was that the federal tax credits that they had intended to apply, they had applied for, they did not think, based on the new administration coming in 2017, that that was going to be likely. So it was based on that new administration coming in that they decided not to go forward with that. They didn't think the tax credits were going to come. And that was key in them being able to develop the site.
And the second part was, what limitations, if any, would there be on other residential uses of the building? What residential uses would there be on the building if for anybody else who would want to use it because of the asbestos?
I think that the cost for us to do it is much more expensive than somebody else. As a school district, it was very expensive for us to remove the asbestos, whereas a normal developer would not have to go through the same costs, I think, that we would have to. They would be able to do it for less money.
Further questions?
And I'll search for the square footage. I'm thinking it's around 30,000 square feet is what I'm
Okay,
recalling.
when you find it, raise your hand and
I will
I'll.
do that. I'm sorry. I'm going to sign this because I think I forgot to sign this when I was up here earlier. Okay.
Thank you. Other than the outstanding question then that we'll await an answer on, I'm going to close the public input section of this hearing, and we'll now go into discussion and possibly vote. Discussion, thoughts? Mr. Ackerson?
Just to kick things off, I think it's highly unlikely that that building's going to get used as is. I think, whatever. That's just as a beginning point. I'm starting my assumption with somebody's going to knock the building down and do something else with it. And I don't know if everybody else is thinking that or not.
Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I'm thinking that as well, especially since the school district wouldn't even use it, at this point. And so, I guess in terms of my thought here, was getting back to what Lou was saying, or his questions about if it's R4, then there's a possibility of maybe reusing the building. But it doesn't seem like that's likely. So for me, it seems, just in my thinking, it seems that R3 would make much better sense. And the planned usage for residential seems to make better sense to me. Now that puts some limits on, and it's a little bit more restrictive. If a developer came in and decided they wanted to do something else, they could come back to this board and decide to propose a different zoning. Right now, we're just speculating. So a lot of people are very opposed to apartments. We're not talking about building apartments on this site. We're just talking about rezoning it with the possibility of that. So nobody's talking about, we have no developer coming in right now to say that they're planning on building an apartment complex right now. If we did in the future, they could come back to this body and propose a zoning change. So it seems to me that we have three different choices come to my mind, and you all will have probably some other aspects here, but one is to go ahead and do an amendment to the proposal here and vote to zone this R3. One is to just defeat it and leave it alone as to what it is and wait until the developer comes, or one is to approve it. So that's kind of where my head is right now in this. And I appreciate all of the neighbors' input. I absolutely appreciate you coming and talking to us tonight, certainly.
That brings me to a question that I had for city staff that I wanted to wait to see what happened here before I asked it, because the options you gave us are to forward the case with approval, recommendation, or to forward the case with recommendation to deny the request. Normally, we do have an option with amendment. Are you, according to the memo, that's not an option here. Is that right, or is that?
Is it always an option?
It usually is.
If the amendment would be a lesser zoning, that is always an option. You can't go higher than what's advertised.
Okay, good to know. Ms. Billman? Okay, we have the answer to our question. So
30,000 square feet.
30,000 square feet. Do you have a calculator, Mr. Fell?
I don't have one.
For easy math? Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, right. Ms. Billman?
Can we have a summary of the R3?
Summary of the R3 is that the permitted uses are agriculture, country club or golf course, elementary, junior high or senior high, park, community living facility, category 1 and category 2. And maybe this is a sort of an assisted living situation, kind of, with residential staff and some people who need some help living. I don't know if that could include a retirement facility or if it's for disabled people or what, but some kind of assisted kind of living. A duplex extended occupancy, single family extended occupancy, and then 2-unit common lot line. So and that compares to R4, has most of those, with the addition of a church, temple, or mosque, institution of a charitable or educational nature, library, museum, or gallery, municipal building, boarding house, dormitory, and then multifamily and multiple unit common lot lines. So those are the main differences. So you've got that extra, really, a little bit into public space that would be a little bit more flexible, but it really is the multifamily. I think that's the main difference. And then there's other conditional and special uses that are, you know, with the gist of R4 being more flexible. Mr. Hopkins?
What question for staff? I'm working off revised 2014 sheets. If R3 or R4 been revised since then?
The R3 sheet I'm looking at says December 2015, so.
So is there something else then that we've missed? Because I've got the same thing you got.
Larger type.
It looks to me like, Mr. Hopkins, we've got a couple of other special uses. No, they're the same.
Yeah,
It looks the same.
the main difference on these is larger type.
Okay, great. All right, so we're current on that at least. Any further discussion? Any, Mr. Ackerson?
I'm waiting for others because I tend to chime in quickly. So,
You're up.
But I sort of want to second what Dan said. This is not an area that's right in the heart of our metro area. It's getting closer to the periphery, and if we change it to R4, it would be dropping R4 into the middle of an R3 area. I think that's true.
R2. Oh, no, R3.
It's
that's right.
R3.
You're
It's
right.
R3. If you look at it,
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
all surrounded by R3. And I think you could get some level of density with duplexes or, I don't know, townhomes or those kinds of things fit there. The bigger thing for me is what Dan had mentioned is absent a proposal by a developer. If we had a pretty good idea of what somebody was planning to do there, I'd be a lot more willing to be open-minded about, kind of talk about what's there, the neighbors' concerns. But right now, it's just a matter of making this lot more attractive to potential developers and somebody who might buy it. So my thought is I'm leaning in the direction of saying R3 just at this point in time makes more sense to me. I wasn't sure if that was going to be an option for us tonight to make an amendment in that direction, but that's where I'm leaning at the moment.
Great. Further discussion? I do want to say that if it's a zoning case, it's not what the person's going to build, it's everything they could build. But if it's a planned unit development or something like that, then it becomes contingent on the way the thing's put together. But so this is all about everything they could build. Mr. Hopkins?
I'm going to endorse what you just said. I think we have to be really careful about the notion that we think we're going to wait until some particular proposal comes along. My view is that this should remain the neighborhood it is. And R4 not only has higher density dwelling units, it also has special uses, business, professional, financial services. It has the planned unit development option for mixed-use planned use development, whereas R3 is only residential PUD. We can't hear you. Oh, well, my mic is on. Is the mic working? I wasn't.
Just get closer.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So, to repeat a little bit anyway, for R4 under special uses, there are non-residential special uses possible. You have to get a special use permit, but it's possible. And planned unit developments under R4 can also be mixed-use PUDs, planned unit developments. Whereas under R3, they can only be residential PUD. I think this is an opportunity to respect a neighborhood that we hear from less in the way we respect neighborhoods that we hear from more. And somebody might know what I'm saying, and if you don't, that's probably better. So I would be inclined to recommend changing this to R3 and realizing that's going to make it harder to sell. But I think that's where we are.
All right, any further discussion? Well, I tend to agree with what I've heard so far, so if anybody's, unless anybody's got a different opinion, and maybe we're ready for some kind of a motion, that would be probably the next step.
Well, can I move to, do I need to change what's proposed first? Or?
First of all, that's a good point. Okay,
Robert's
so what
rules.
we've got two things going on here. So let me just step back from the motion thing for a second. I got ahead of myself. We've got the zoning map change, which right now calls for mixed residential.
Right.
Which is toward the R4 and up.
And I would propose residential.
So that would be one motion. And with a change to that.
To the comprehensive
To the
plan.
comprehensive plan, correct. Second motion would then deal with the zoning, and with whatever amendment you might wish to propose.
Sure.
Consistent with what we heard from city staff, and we would vote on those sequentially. So we'll do the plan amendment first, which we really shouldn't do the zoning without doing the map amendment.
May I ask a clarifying question? I didn't hear a lot of discussion about the comprehensive plan amendment, yet you're about to vote on that. So I'm a little worried.
Not yet, I stopped
Okay.
myself.
I'm hoping just for the record, we could have perhaps a little discussion on that, because you mentioned something that we hadn't talked about.
That's a
But
great
of course,
idea.
you always make a motion, and then you can open the floor for discussion.
True,
So
true.
we're not voting quite yet.
She's just trying to be our conscience. So.
Absolutely.
Quickly, I mean, to me, they're sort of in lockstep.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's surrounded by the residential plan, and so that
Mm-hmm.
seems to me to make a lot of sense to include that in there as well.
Should we read the descriptions from the one that you're proposing so that everyone is aware of what the description says for that? Would you like me
Sure.
to do that?
That'd be great. If you've got those before you, otherwise I can.
So residential urban pattern is on 56 for any of you that have your comprehensive plans at home. Residential areas contain primarily single-family residential housing, but may also include a variety of compatible land uses such as duplexes, townhomes, civic uses, institutional uses, and parks where zoning is appropriate. Residential areas can have a different physical pattern of development. And then it goes on further to talk about the urban pattern of development. A pattern of development that is typically found in older established neighborhoods includes a grid network of streets with, in some cases, vehicular access from rear alleys. Streets may be narrow in order to slow down traffic and favor the pedestrian. The urban pattern also contains a well-connected sidewalk system that encourages walking and provides convenient pedestrian access to nearby business centers. May include smaller lots where homes face the street and the presence of garages along the street is minimized.
Great. As opposed to mixed residential, which contains a variety of uses, including single-family residences, duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily development. Graduation of densities between single and multifamily, so generally a higher intensity usage, higher density, wider range of structures and special uses. Anything further on the plan?
So residential urban pattern is what?
Actually, the plan just says residential.
No, well,
The
map
future
says
land use map,
residential.
correct. Future land use map.
But, yes. That is correct. And it's not clear to me that there is any designation other than the map. So I think we only have to say residential.
I think that's right. To be consistent with the map as it is, yes.
Well, to be consistent with any designation of a place.
I don't know if there's anything else in here that uses that specific term, other than in the definition.
I'm pretty sure in the West Urbana neighborhood, we specify that that's the urban pattern, but I think that's the only place in the future land use maps we actually spell that out, so. Oh, and in East Urbana, but. If the intent is to make it consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, then just saying residential is probably okay.
All right.
So we can
Yeah.
make the motion and drop the word mixed. Is that correct?
Sure, if somebody's ready to do that. Pertaining to the map and the plan amendment. Ms. Vidrago.
I guess I want to mention some comments about, before we eliminate the possibility of mixed residential. I know it's not favored by pretty much anybody in the room, but I'm not saying I favor it. But I looked back at the LaSalle criteria, and number 2 says, looking at the extent to which property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. So that implies that property values are diminished by the restrictions of ordinances. Would you agree that as ordinances become more restrictive, that property values are diminished?
I'm going to ask city staff for a little help in interpretation here, but I think that means by the change. So if we change it from CRE to almost anything else, we're probably not damaging the property value. It's possible, probable, that R4 would have more value than R3, if that's, I think, what you're saying. But I take the LaSalle criteria to mean the effect of the proposed change. So in other words, the change from CRE to anything else is not going to diminish the property value, in my opinion.
It's just a possibility.
I think it's probably not. You know, it probably would increase the property value, in my opinion.
Right. It'd be the extent to which it would or wouldn't diminish.
If this were R4 and we were going down to R3, then I think something like that discussion would come into play. I think if you're going to CRE up to R3 or R4, that criteria would not diminish the property value in either case, in my opinion. But I do get your point, and I think that was to Mr. Hopkins' point, that it's probably harder to sell, and probably we're not realtors, and there's a disclaimer that we should issue to that fact. It's probably harder to sell, and it's probably worth less as R3 than R4. But I don't think that impacts the LaSalle criteria, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's number 4, and it says relative gain to the public versus hardship imposed on individual property owners. And I don't know if by hardship that means financial hardship, but I assume it's financial hardship. And
Excuse me.
I don't know, I assume that when it says hardship, it means financial hardship.
That and other things, I'm sure, yes.
But I think that some of the opposition from this evening is more emotional hardship or fear of
Excuse me,
property
excuse me.
values.
Excuse me, sir.
Right. So I don't know if we've discussed enough what the relative gain to the public would be, if anybody wants to comment on that.
So you're not sure we've discussed the relative gain to the public of increasing to either rezoning to R3 or R4?
Rezoning to R4 versus rezoning to R3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Anybody care to address that? Ms. Billman?
Well, it seems to me that rezoning to R4 would give some greater value if the current properties were raised. but not as, I don't think as individual properties it's going to increase the value. I think to these homeowners, forgive me if I speak for you, they think that the value of the properties will go down.
The surrounding properties.
Their own.
Correct,
yeah,
correct.
Yes.
Again, the LaSalle criteria, and this is something that it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. It applies to the property that we're considering rezoning. So now we're free to consider, obviously we should consider what happens to the neighborhood. But the LaSalle criteria doesn't really speak to that point, I don't think. And a minute ago I said I wasn't a realtor, and I'm also not a lawyer. But I think that's actually appropriate interpretation. Mr. Hopkins?
I was going to go back to what I thought we were on, is the comprehensive plan amendment. I
That's
stand
true.
corrected that urban pattern, suburban pattern are indeed noted in several places on the plan maps. So I think we should make that distinction, and I think urban pattern is the correct designation for this neighborhood.
So that's residential urban pattern? How's
That's
the
that's the
wording?
description of the, yeah.
What I would propose, I don't have the case description in front of me to make a motion.
And this is on the map amendment, not on the zoning.
Yes.
It's,
So this is plan case 2326, CP 17. But I need the language. Let's see. So it would be plan case 2326, CP 17, amended 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan, future land use designation for 1102 North Broadway Avenue, which address, I assume, is sufficient to designate 5 parcels. That's
I guess so.
editorial comment.
Yeah.
From institutional to residential urban pattern. So the last 2 words, or I'm
Or amended.
deleting the word mixed and adding urban pattern.
Okay, motion by Mr. Hopkins, second by Mr. Turner. This pertains to the proposed comp plan amendment 2326 CP 17.
Did we get back to the question about the
We're- We're going to come back to that on the zoning question. Any further discussion? Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Spillman?
Yes?
Can I get it repeated exactly what we're voting on this time? Just to make sure.
Sure. A request by Urbana School District 116 to amend the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan future land use designation for 1102 North Broadway Avenue from institutional to residential urban pattern.
Making a
Is to make a recommendation for approval of that to the city council. That's correct. So yes means yes in this case. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. Oh, no. So, all right. Let's restart the roll call. Thank you.
Ms. Spillman?
Yes?
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. Wadrago?
Yes.
Mr. Trail?
No.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
And Mr. Ackerson?
yes.
That motion passes. Okay. Now, for the zoning question. Ms. Wadrago, you had some questions about the relative value, I think, of R4 versus R3. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that, or if we want to go ahead and put the motion in, if there's going to be one, and then revisit in the discussion.
Yeah, and I would be okay with moving to motion, especially after the previous motion already made.
Okay.
Kind of makes sense.
Sure.
So, it's fine.
Well, you never know. Okay, do we have any motions on this? This particular one would be Plan Case 2325M17.
I'll move to forward to City Council a motion of approving this, the zoning approximately 2.5 acres from CRE to R3.
Great, so the motion is recommendation for approval to the City Council with a change in the proposal from R4 Medium Density Multiple Family Residential Zoning District to R3 Single and Two Family Residential Zoning District. So a motion by Mr. Turner, second by Ms. Billman. Any further discussion? Mr. Fell?
I think I like this motion the best for a couple reasons, and to me, this is kind of a unique case, because we have two, not necessarily opposing views, but two views which were both is our task to represent, and that's not usually the case. And so I think by doing the best for both parties is zoning this R3, because R4 we can't walk back from. We can always walk up to it, but we can't walk back from it. So while it may put a slight damper on the school district being able to sell the property, I think it is absolutely the correct thing to do.
Great, thank you, Mr. Fell. Further discussion? Mr. Anderson?
I just want to add that I do think it's an improvement to go from CRE, the current zoning, to R3. I think that's an improvement for the neighborhood. I think it's also an improvement over a vacant piece of land. The school district has been trying to do something in good faith, I think. But I think it's I don't want to say a win-win, but it seems like it moves in a better direction for both. So I just want to second Mr. Fell's comments.
Okay. Further discussion? Nope. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. Wadrago?
Yes.
Mr. Trail?
No.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson?
Yes.
And Ms. Billman?
Yes.
That motion is approved. Do we have a ETA for the City Council, for the record?
I think it'll be March 5th. Sorry, February 5th.
See there? February 5th. If
Yes.
you'd like to weigh in again with the council. Okay, so that case is concluded. Thanks, everyone, for your testimony, and to the school district as well. She's stepped out, but I agree with it. It was good. Oh, I thought it was you. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have any new business. We don't have any audience participation. We don't have a staff report, or maybe we do have a staff report.
Just an update that the previous case that you heard was the Champaign County ZBA case, whether or not to protest the change to their home occupation rules. Your recommendation to council was not to protest on on Tuesday. Council voted not to protest.
Great. We're vindicated.
Did that have anything to do with the stuff I saw on TV about?
Yeah, somebody was on TV. I saw that. Yeah. We don't have a study session. Therefore, we're adjourned. Thank you.